Today you'll witness the shocking story of Derek
Remove
Williams,
your hand from that
a social
tomb
media
immediately,
influencer
or I
whose
will
reckless
consider you a
decision to
direct
touch
threat
the
to this
sacred
sacred
tomb of the
site.
unknown soldier triggered a response that made national headlines and changed military protocol forever. Prepare yourself for a tale of disrespect, consequences, and an unexpected twist that will leave you speechless. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. The humid summer air hung thick over Arlington National Cemetery on July 15, 2022. It was 3:15 in the afternoon, and the sacred grounds were bustling with visitors from around the world who had come to pay their respects to America's fallen heroes. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood majestically against the clear blue sky, its pristine white marble gleaming under the intense Virginia sun. Among the crowd of respectful tourists and grieving families stood Derek Williams, a 26-year-old social media influencer from Los Angeles with over 2 million followers across various platforms. Derek had built his online empire through increasingly outrageous stunts and boundary-pushing content that often landed him in trouble with authorities. His motto, emblazoned across his merchandise, read, "No limits, no regrets," a philosophy that had made him wealthy, but had also earned him a reputation as someone who would do anything for views and viral fame. Derek adjusted his expensive camera equipment, his eyes constantly scanning for the perfect shot that would generate maximum engagement from his audience. He had flown to Washington, D.C., specifically to create content at various monuments and memorials, treating the nation's most sacred sites as nothing more than backdrops for his next viral video. "What's up, Williams Warriors?" Derek spoke into his camera with practiced enthusiasm, using his signature greeting for his followers. "We're here at Arlington Cemetery, and I'm about to show you some content that's going to absolutely blow your minds. This place is supposed to be super sacred and untouchable, but you know your boy Derek doesn't believe in limits." Standing guard at the tomb was Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a 31-year-old career soldier from Phoenix, Arizona. She had earned her position as a tomb guard through months of rigorous training and had maintained the sacred vigil for over a year. Her uniform was immaculate, every detail perfect, from the razor-sharp creases in her pants to the mirror-like shine on her boots. The M14 rifle on her shoulder was positioned with mathematical precision, and her face remained stoically focused on her duty. Santos had seen all types of visitors during her time as a guard. She had witnessed tearful family members saying goodbye to loved ones, veterans saluting their fallen comrades, and children learning about sacrifice and service for the first time. She had also dealt with her share of disrespectful tourists, but nothing had prepared her for what was about to unfold. Derek began live streaming to his audience, his voice carrying across the normally quiet space as he provided commentary on everything around him. "So check this out, guys. They have these guards here who supposedly never break character, never speak, never do anything except walk back and forth like robots. I bet I can get a reaction out of them. What do you think? Should we test their limits?" The chat on his live stream exploded with encouragement from his followers, many of whom were eager to see him push boundaries and create controversy. Comments flooded in suggesting increasingly inappropriate actions, each one more disrespectful than the last. Derek fed off this energy, his confidence growing with each supportive message from his online audience. "All right, warriors, you've spoken," Derek announced, his voice growing louder and more animated. "Time to see if these so-called elite guards are really as disciplined as everyone claims. This is going to be epic." He began moving closer to the rope barriers that separated visitors from the sacred tomb, his camera capturing every step. Other tourists started to notice his disruptive behavior, with several families quietly moving their children away from the area. An elderly veteran wearing a Vietnam War cap shook his head in disgust and approached a nearby security guard to report the disturbance. Derek was completely oblivious to the growing concern around him, focused entirely on his live stream and the validation he was receiving from his online followers. His pursuit of viral content had blinded him to the sacred nature of his surroundings and the pain his actions were causing to those who understood the true meaning of the place. As Derek continued his live stream, his behavior became increasingly erratic and attention-seeking. He began making jokes about military traditions, mocking the precision of Staff Sergeant Santos's movements, and encouraging his viewers to share the stream to expose what he called the military theater of Arlington Cemetery. "Look at this, warriors," Derek said, zooming his camera in on Santos as she executed her 21-step routine. She's been doing the same thing over and over for like 20 minutes. This isn't honor. This is just a really boring job that taxpayers are paying for. I bet she's not even a real soldier. The comments on his live stream were a mixture of encouragement from his regular followers and growing outrage from viewers who understood the significance of what they were witnessing. Several people began reporting the stream to platform moderators, but Derek's content was generating such massive engagement that the algorithms were actually promoting it to even more viewers. Staff Sergeant Santos maintained her composure despite the growing distraction. Her training had prepared her for various disruptions, but the sustained nature of Derek's commentary was testing her professional limits. She could hear every word he was saying, every joke he was making at the expense of the soldiers who lay beneath the marble she was sworn to protect. "You know what, guys?" Derek said, his voice taking on a more dangerous tone. "I think it's time we really tested these limits. My followers want to see something epic, and I'm going to deliver. Watch this." Derek ducked under the rope barrier and stepped onto the restricted area surrounding the tomb. Gasps echoed through the crowd of visitors, and several people began reaching for their phones to call security. This was more than just disrespectful commentary. This was a direct violation of federal law and the sanctity of one of America's most sacred spaces. "Derek, no!" shouted a woman in the crowd who had been following his live stream on her own phone. "You're going to get arrested." But Derek was beyond listening to reason. The adrenaline rush of breaking rules, combined with the explosive reaction from his online audience, had pushed him into a state of reckless abandon. His viewer count was climbing rapidly, and he could see the donations pouring in from followers who were thrilled by his audacious behavior. "This is it, warriors," Derek announced triumphantly. "Your boy Derek is about to make history. No one has ever done what I'm about to do." Staff Sergeant Santos stopped her routine mid-step, her training and instincts warring with the unprecedented nature of the situation unfolding before her. Protocol dictated specific responses to various types of disruptions, but Derek's actions were escalating beyond anything covered in standard procedures. Derek approached the tomb itself, his camera held high to capture every moment. "Look at this thing," he said dismissively. "It's just a big marble box. All this ceremony and tradition for what? Some unknown dead guy who probably died decades ago? This is 2022, people. Time to move on from this ancient history." The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Veterans in the group stepped forward with clenched fists, their faces red with anger and indignation. A Gold Star mother began crying, while several active-duty military personnel in civilian clothes started moving toward Derek to physically intervene. "Sir, step away from the tomb immediately," shouted a cemetery security guard who had been alerted to the situation. But Derek was too caught up in his performance to listen. "You want to see something that's never been done before?" Derek asked his livestream audience, his voice filled with manic energy. "You want content that will break the internet? Well, here it is." With that declaration, Derek reached out and placed his hand directly on the marble surface of the tomb of the unknown soldier. The sacred stone that had remained untouched by visitors for over a century was now being violated by someone seeking nothing more than social media fame. The reaction from the crowd was explosive. Shouts of outrage filled the air, and several people began pushing forward to physically remove Derek from the tomb. The livestream chat erupted into chaos, with viewers expressing everything from excitement to absolute horror at what they were witnessing. Staff Sergeant Santos felt something snap inside her. This wasn't just a violation of protocol or even federal law. This was a desecration of everything she had sworn to protect. The unknown soldiers beneath that marble had died for their country, and their final resting place was being treated like a prop in a social media stunt. But what happened next would shock everyone present and create a moment that would be replayed millions of times across news networks and social media platforms around the world. The moment Derek's hand made contact with the sacred marble, Staff Sergeant Santos made a decision that would redefine military protocol and create a moment that would be studied in military academies for years to come. Instead of following standard procedure and calling for backup, instead of maintaining her stoic silence, she did something that had never been done in the history of the Tomb Guard. She broke formation, turned sharply toward Derek, and in one fluid motion, brought her rifle down from her shoulder into a combat-ready position. The metallic click of the weapon being readied echoed across the suddenly silent cemetery like a thunderclap. "Halt!" Santos commanded, her voice carrying the full authority of the United States Army. "Remove your hand from that tomb immediately, or I will consider you a direct threat to this sacred site." The transformation in Santos was instantaneous and terrifying. Gone was the ceremonial guard performing a ritual. In her place stood a combat-trained soldier prepared to defend what she held most sacred. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that made it clear she was not bluffing, not performing, not following any script. Derek froze, his hand still pressed against the marble, his camera shaking in his other hand. For the first time since beginning his stunt, he seemed to grasp the magnitude of what he had done. The playful boundary pushing that had made him famous had crossed into something far more serious, and he was now facing the consequences of his actions. I'm just making content, Derek stammered, his voice losing all of its previous confidence. This is America. I have rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You have the right to remain silent, Santos replied, her weapon still trained on him. You have the right to remove yourself from that tomb before I exercise my authority to protect this site by any means necessary. The crowd had fallen into absolute silence, everyone understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Cell phone cameras captured every second of the confrontation, and Derek's own live stream continued broadcasting the scene to his millions of followers, though his viewer count was now climbing for entirely different reasons than he had intended. "Ma'am, please," Derek said, his voice now pleading rather than commanding. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just trying to create content for my followers. This is all just entertainment." Santos took a step closer, her military bearing making her appear larger and more intimidating than her actual stature. "Entertainment?" she repeated, her voice filled with controlled fury. "You think the sacrifice of unknown soldiers is entertainment? You think the grief of Gold Star families is content for your social media empire?" Derek's hand began to tremble against the marble as the reality of his situation sank in. The guard wasn't just following protocol. She was genuinely prepared to use force to protect the tomb. Her training, her dedication, her sworn oath to guard the unknown soldiers had transformed her into something formidable and uncompromising. "These soldiers," Santos continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "died fighting for the very freedoms you're abusing right now. They gave their lives so that people like you could speak freely, could pursue happiness, could build whatever life you wanted. And this is how you honor their sacrifice? By treating their final resting place like a prop in your circus act?" The live stream chat had exploded into chaos, with viewers from around the world expressing shock, outrage, and support for the guard's actions. News outlets were already picking up the story, and within minutes the confrontation was being broadcast on major networks across the country. Derek tried to remove his hand from the tomb, but Santos's next command stopped him cold. "Don't move," she ordered. "You wanted to touch something sacred? Then you're going to stay right there until the proper authorities arrive to deal with your violation of federal law. You're going to feel the weight of what you've done." The psychological impact of being forced to maintain contact with the tomb while facing an armed guard was immediate and profound. Derek's casual disrespect began to crumble as he was forced to confront the reality of where he was and what he had done. The marble beneath his palm seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, as if the weight of history and sacrifice was pressing down on him. "Please," Derek whispered, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I understand now. I made a mistake. I'm sorry." But Santos wasn't finished. Her response would become one of the most powerful moments in military history, a statement that would be quoted in textbooks and remembered long after the viral video was forgotten. "Sorry?" Santos repeated, her voice carrying across the silent cemetery. "You're sorry? Do you know what sorry means to the families who visit this tomb? Sorry means a telegram delivered to a mother telling her that her son died in a foreign land. Sorry means a flag folded 13 times and handed to a widow. Sorry means children who will never know their father's voice." Derek's livestream continued broadcasting, but his followers were no longer cheering for his antics. The comments had shifted dramatically, with many expressing shame for having encouraged his behavior, and others calling for him to face serious consequences for his actions. "You came here seeking fame," Santos continued, her weapon still ready. "You wanted to create content that would go viral, that would make you money, that would feed your ego. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded. But not in the way you intended." The sound of approaching sirens could be heard in the distance as cemetery security and federal law enforcement responded to the emergency. Derek's violation of the tomb had triggered protocols that would result in serious federal charges, potential prison time, and consequences that would follow him for the rest of his life. "The soldier's beneath your hand," Santos said, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its authority. They were someone's son, someone's brother, someone's hero. They died believing that their sacrifice meant something, that their country would remember them, that their final resting place would be treated with the respect they earned through their service. Derek's tears were flowing freely now, the weight of his actions finally breaking through his social media persona. The man who had built his career on pushing boundaries and seeking attention was discovering that some boundaries should never be crossed, that some attention comes with a price too high to pay. "I didn't know," Derek sobbed. "I didn't understand what this place meant." "That's the problem," Santos replied. "You didn't care to know. You saw an opportunity for content, for views, for money, and you took it without considering the cost, without considering the pain you would cause to people who understand what sacrifice really means." The federal agents arrived within minutes, their black SUVs creating a perimeter around the tomb area. Agent Patricia Coleman, a 20-year veteran of federal law enforcement, approached the scene with the gravity that such a violation demanded. She had investigated numerous cases involving the desecration of national monuments, but never had she seen such a blatant and public violation of one of America's most sacred sites. "Staff Sergeant Santos," Agent Coleman called out, her voice professional but respectful. "We'll take it from here." Santos maintained her position, her weapon still ready, her eyes never leaving Derek. "Agent Coleman, this individual has violated federal law by touching the tomb of the unknown soldier. He has shown complete disrespect for this sacred site and has broadcast his actions to millions of viewers online." Derek remained frozen, his hand still pressed against the marble, his live stream continuing to broadcast the unfolding arrest to a global audience. His viewer count had reached unprecedented levels, but for all the wrong reasons. What had started as a stunt for social media fame had become a national incident that would define his life forever. "Mr. Williams," Agent Coleman addressed Derek directly, "you are under arrest for violating federal law by defacing a national monument. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights continued, Derek's followers watched in real time as their influencer hero was handcuffed and led away from the tomb. The live stream continued from his dropped phone, capturing the aftermath of his actions and the solemn return to normalcy as Staff Sergeant Santos resumed her sacred duty. The news of Derek's arrest spread like wildfire across social media platforms and news networks. Within hours, the video of his confrontation with Santos had been viewed millions of times, shared by everyone from military families to government officials. The hashtag #RespectTheUnknown began trending worldwide as people expressed their support for Santos and their outrage at Derek's actions. In the days that followed, Derek's arrest became a catalyst for a national conversation about respect, sacrifice, and the true meaning of freedom. Military families shared their stories. Veterans spoke about the significance of the tomb of the unknown soldier, and educators used the incident as a teaching moment about the cost of liberty. Derek's social media empire crumbled overnight. Sponsors pulled their support, platforms suspended his accounts, and his merchandise sales plummeted as the public turned against him. The man who had built his career on controversy discovered that some controversies destroy rather than create. Meanwhile, Staff Sergeant Santos became an unexpected hero. Her decision to break protocol in defense of the tomb was praised by military leaders, veterans organizations, and millions of Americans who saw her actions as the perfect response to Derek's disrespect. She received commendations from the highest levels of government and became a symbol of military honor and dedication. The legal consequences for Derek were severe. Federal prosecutors charged him with multiple violations, including defacing a national monument, disturbing the peace at a national cemetery, and violating federal regulations governing Arlington National Cemetery. The charges carried potential prison time and substantial fines that would bankrupt his social media fortune. During his court appearance, Derek faced not only the judge but also the families of fallen soldiers who had come to witness justice being served. Gold Star mothers, war widows, and veterans filled the courtroom, their presence a powerful reminder of the real cost of the freedoms Derek had so carelessly abused. "Your Honor," Derek's attorney pleaded, "my client is young and made a terrible mistake. He's learned from this experience and is genuinely remorseful for his actions." But the federal prosecutor painted a different picture. "Your Honor, this wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated act of disrespect designed to generate social media engagement and financial profit." The defendant showed complete disregard for one of our nation's most sacred sites and caused immeasurable pain to military families across the country. The judge, a veteran himself, listened to both sides before delivering a sentence that would send a message to anyone considering similar acts of disrespect. Derek was sentenced to 6 months in federal prison, 2 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service to be performed at veterans' hospitals and military cemeteries. The impact of Derek's actions reverberated far beyond the courtroom. His case became a landmark example of consequences for disrespecting national monuments. Law schools used his case as study material, while military academies incorporated Staff Sergeant Santos's response into training programs. Derek's time in federal prison was a harsh awakening. Surrounded by inmates who respected military service, he found himself isolated and forced to confront his actions. Many prisoners were veterans themselves, making clear his actions were unforgivable. During incarceration, Derek received thousands of letters from military families and veterans expressing anger and disappointment. But among the condemnation were letters offering forgiveness, written by people who believed even someone who made such terrible mistakes could learn and grow. One letter changed Derek's perspective forever. It came from Margaret Thompson, a Gold Star mother whose son died in Afghanistan and whose remains were never recovered. She wrote about finding comfort at the tomb of the unknown soldier, knowing someone like her son was honored there. "Mr. Williams," her letter read, "you hurt thousands of families with your actions, but people can change and learn from mistakes. If you truly want to make amends, use your platform to educate others about the real meaning of sacrifice and service." Upon release, Derek was transformed. The arrogant influencer seeking fame through controversy was gone, replaced by someone understanding the weight of responsibility that came with a public platform. He began community service at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, working with wounded veterans. The veterans were initially skeptical and hostile, but Derek's genuine remorse and dedication gradually won some over. He listened to their stories, learned about their sacrifices, and began understanding what he had truly violated. When Derek completed community service, he surprised everyone by enrolling in college to study military history and veterans affairs. He wanted to dedicate his life to educating others about American service members' sacrifices. 5 years later, Derek returned to Arlington Cemetery for the first time since his arrest. He came not as an influencer seeking content, but as a changed man paying respects properly. He stood silently before the tomb of the unknown soldier, tears streaming as he remembered the pain his actions had caused. Staff Sergeant Santos, now serving as military liaison to veterans organizations, happened to be visiting that day. Seeing Derek standing respectfully, she approached quietly. "Mr. Williams," she said softly. Derek turned, recognizing the woman whose life he had changed. "Sergeant Santos, I wanted to come back and do this right, to show the respect I should have shown the first time." Santos nodded, seeing genuine transformation. The soldiers beneath that marble died believing people could change, that their sacrifice could make the world better. Maybe they were right. Derek's story became a powerful example of redemption and learning from serious mistakes. His transformation from disrespectful influencer to dedicated veterans advocate showed that even those who fall furthest can find their way back to honor. The incident had shocked the nation, but its aftermath proved that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most painful mistakes. Derek Williams had dared to touch something sacred and learned the true meaning of sacrifice, respect, and redemption.